Hello, Vice. How are you, man? Vice.
Hi, Subin.
How are you?
Yeah. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Are you in the college or home?
Pardon me?
Are you in the college?
Hello?
Are you in the college?
No.
Okay. Okay, see you, man.
Hello?
നമ്മുടെ ഫസ്റ്റ് ബി സിയിലോട്ടെ ഫസ്റ്റ് ബി എയിലോട്ട് ലിങ്ക് ഒന്ന് അയച്ചു കൊടുക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഇല്ല ഞാനിടുമല്ല. എൻ്റെ അല്ലത്, ഞാൻ വേറെ ഉണ്ട് മണ്ടത്തരം കാണിച്ചു വെച്ചേക്കുന്നത്. ഹലോ, Antony sir.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, you're here?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe in a couple of minutes we can start.
Yeah, that's all right, sir.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Welcome back, everyone. We are starting the afternoon session of today's e-conference. Our third talk is on Alex Haley by Mr. Antony Jose, Assistant Professor, Naipunya College, Ernakulam. Before inviting the speaker, I ask Malavika to say a few words on Mr. Antony.
Good afternoon, everyone. Respected teachers and my dear friends. I'm delighted to introduce Mr. Antony Jose, Assistant Professor from Naipunya School of Management, Cherthala. He's an award winner for Best Dissertation in the Hartian Research Congress. I'm eager to listen to his talk on the American writer Alexander Murray Palmer Haley. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
All right. Thank you. First of all, let me use this instance to place on record my heartfelt gratitude to English Department, DEVA MATHA College, and each and everyone who have worked in order to orchestrate this momentous event on a relevant topic. And also thanks for having me and inviting me here. So, yeah, everyone should start. Right. On the 2nd of February, 1977, The Tonight Show, a popular talk show in US at that point in time, was started by its host, Johnny Carson, something like this. Do you know who we have with us here tonight? We have with us that wonderful author who wrote that amazing book, Roots. Yes, we have Alex Haley with us here tonight. If there is anyone who's watching who does not know Alex Haley or haven't heard of Roots or having read Roots, you must have been either out of the country or living in Mars or someplace, joked Johnny Carson. So that much popular was Alex Haley and his book Roots at that point in time in US. The odds are, had he been living in America, and in the late 1970s, the odds are you might have either read the book or watched its serialization in the American Broadcasting Corporation. But fast forward to 2020, except a few academicians like us, no one talks about roots. There is actually a deafening discourse of silence around roots. The Northern Anthology of Afro-American literature, which runs to some 3,000 pages, does not talk about roots, does not include roots, does not even have any sort of mention about roots. And many other anthologies and many other Afro-American critics keep a silence about this particular author and his works. Why is it that so? And after all, who is Alex Haley? We'll take a look at that. First of all, Alexander Murray Palmer Haley, popularly known as Alex Haley, was born on 11th of August, 1921, Ithaca, New York, United States of America. After his studies, he joined the U.S. Coast Guard, where he worked as a steward, which was the highest rank open for a black man at that point in time. After the Pacific War, that is the Second World War in the Pacific Ocean, he filed a petition to move to the journalist journalistic section of the Coast Guard, which was something unheard of at that point in time, because usually during peace times, U.S. Coast Guard did not have a vacancy for a journalist at that point in time. But then they allowed his request and posted him as a journalist with the Guards. Interestingly, Alex Haley was someone who used to write a lot of letters on behalf of his friends, especially love letters to their sweethearts. He was also, or rather he had a popular style of writing that everyone liked. And this is one of the reasons why the Coast Guard allowed him to allow his request, allowed him to work as a journalist with the Coast Guard. In 1959, he resigned from the Coast Guard and decided that he would rather focus his attention on writing. He worked some time for the Playboy magazine, after which he worked for the Reader's Digest, wherein he got opportunities to interview many prominent historical figures at that point in time. The first one was the jazz musician Miles Davis. Then came a meeting with Muhammad Ali. After that, he got a chance to interview Malcolm X, who was becoming the race hero, the voice of the Afro-Americans alongside Martin Luther King. So, after his first interview with Malcolm X, which means that he got a chance to interview him again, a literary agent from the Groves Press approached Malcolm and Alex Haley in order to write a book about Malcolm, rather a biography or an autobiography of Malcolm X. Malcolm was initially hesitant, he was not ready for that, but after getting the blessings from Elijah Muhammad, sort of an encouragement from him, Malcolm decided that he would write his autobiography with the assistance of Alex Haley. And when we talk about autobiography, usually autobiographies are written by the person himself. And when it comes to this particular autobiography, it was written by Alex Haley in the sense that the text is a formulation or a anthologizing of the interviews that Alex Haley had with Malcolm X. They had around 5 interviews between 1960 and 1965 when Malcolm was eventually assassinated. Autobiography was published posthumously and it became an instant hit, to say the least. After the assassination, in fact, the dead Malcolm X became more prominent than the Malcolm who was living at that point, because that autobiography was that much popular. So what made this autobiography that much popular? In fact, it just like any other autobiography, describes the life of its subject from his birth until his assassination. So what is so popular about this autobiography? According to many critics, this autobiography constructed Malcolm X as a cultural signifier among the Afro-Americans. And the popularity of the autobiography resulted from the engagement of Malcolm's personal self as a rhetoric of politics and a philosophy. In other words, Malcolm X had a personality that empowered his politics. Bell Hooks, in her essay, Sitting at the Feet of the Messenger, Remembering Malcolm X, writes, his biography created a persona which is public and has a sense of realness and commonness along with it. And this realness is contributed by his ability to engage with his audience and readers through his committed and personal act of racial self-love. As readers, we follow him through his acts, we follow him through his struggles, acts of self-recovery to throw off the yoke of racism. He had a quest of self-realization, which is something common in autobiographies, which is to say that autobiography is a genre that presents dramatically an individual's quest to a point of completion. But unlike other autobiographies, according to Bell Hooks, this particular autobiography of Malcolm X did not have any such point of completion. In the words of another literary critic, Paul John Eaton, this text resists any such point of completion, introducing a familiar discourse about Malcolm X, that he was a person whose life and politics resist easy codification. In other words, he was like an ever-moving frontier. He used to change all the time. He was, to put it simply, an open-minded person. That's the simplest term I can think of at this moment. This particular openness, in other words, could be described as Malcolm's ability to consider himself as the source of his political and philosophical rhetoric. And according to many critics, this negotiation of fragmentation and multiplicity could be cited as a borrowing of certain black women's contributions to the political paradigm. Through this, I will be presenting a critique of Malcolm X's autobiography from the position of a black woman's, black female contributions to the political paradigm. Let's see how those emancipatory traditions influence Malcolm X's autobiography. All right, so the particular emancipatory tradition that I allude here can be cumulatively termed the interior tropes of activism. This is not to say that black women's contributions to the liberation ideology only involved the interior. On the contrary, they have already proposed that the interior and the exterior be merged in the act of self-decolonization, that they are mutually supporting necessary counterparts. In other words, many black feminists, beginning from Angela Davis, Patricia Collins, Audre Lorde, and many others, have suggested that transformation is a highly personal process. Personal transformation is not just a vehicle that facilitates political liberation, but also liberation in itself. That's what basically it is. On a similar note, in her foreword to Body and Soul, a Black Woman's Guide to Physical Health and Emotional Well-Being, Angela Davis and June Jordan suggest that you cannot conceptualize healthy bodies, psyches, and communities without addressing the problems that are being considered as taboo. In her essay, Textual Healing, another literary critic and activist, Farah Jasmine Griffin, also suggests the same. She encourages her readers to challenge the inherent patriarchal influence that privileges the public sphere over the private, and matters of physical and emotional well-being, which are connected with the private sphere, as unimportant and therefore not political. What these feminists are suggesting is to move beyond these barriers and to merge these two different spheres of influence together. Or in other words, you cannot view these spheres of influence in a binary terminology. You cannot do that. That's that is in its simplest form. This multivalent liberation ideology is particular to the writings of Black women and is also evident historically in their cultural responses as well. The blues of Nina Simons or the activities of Sojourner Truth, or even the essays and writings of Alice Walker presents this fusion of otherwise binary oppositions. What is significant about this particular ideology is that it presents an alternative to Black male liberation ideologies. In his introduction to Reading Black, Reading Feminist, the contemporary critic Henry Louis Gates Jr. tries to hint at some of these differences, that the differences between masculine and feminine worldviews. According to him, Black women have never been obsessed with arriving at a singular self-image. Rather than arriving at a monolith of their experience, they sought to chart the multiplicity of their experience. Further, he quotes Mary Helen Washington to hone his comments. According to her, there are no women in this tradition who are hibernating in dark holes, contemplating their invisibility. There are no women who are dismembering their bodies or crushing the skulls of either men or women. Women speak to other women in this tradition, is what Henry Louis Gates quotes from Mary Helen Washington to reinforce this particular idea. Another theme about this Black women's liberation ideology is that they also introduce the notion of healing liberation ideology. According to bell hooks, decolonization as healing directs the mediating force of truth towards overcoming the implied and imposed fragmentation of the self, which is synonymous with oppression. In Black narratives, this particular act of mediation is termed as an interior journey. In other words, this is what I was referring to as the interior tropes of activism. To put it simply, although the intention is to embrace a political change, Black women, unlike Black men, emphasize on the personal as political. Their journeys often take personal and psychological means, as opposed to men who often hops on trains and hit the road to travel to that elusive space called freedom. This is what the difference is all about. You might be wondering why am I talking about all these Black feminist ideologies of liberation? Basically because, according to many critics, this particular ideology is evident in the readings, in the autobiography of Malcolm X. This interior tropes of activism could be found in the autobiography of Malcolm X. In Malcolm's life, he considered his personal self as a source of his political ideology and of power. Political ideology and power. This text constructs a Malcolm who believed that only in the negotiation of truth through constant personal shifts, what Amiri Barakov has called the stumbling and groping, that liberation could be achieved. And this particular ideology could be found in the autobiography in 3 different tropes. First would be termed as reclamation of body. Second, negotiation of fragmented selves. And the third, silence in and as activism. So let's take a look at each of these elements. Reclamation of body. It's basically following the Cartesian division and hierarchization of mind and body. Black people are always defined as body alone, both in gender as well as racial lines. According to this theory, the Afro-Americans are defined as having no will and therefore no agency. Afro-American writers, especially beginning from the 18th century, beginning from the religious writers, started challenging this dichotomy. They believed that whole histories have been written on these bodies, and if liberation is to occur, they are to be engaged. The same could be seen in Malcolm X's autobiography. Throughout this autobiography, all the transformation in Malcolm's life are written upon his body. During his lifetime, he goes to prison. He began as a hustler and a drug dealer in Harlem, New York. And after that, he goes to prison. And after his arrival from prison, he becomes a devoted follower of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. But after several years, during which he learns about the alleged adulterous activities of Elijah Muhammad, and there was a rift between Muhammad and Malcolm. And at the end of the day, Malcolm is expelled from the Nation of Islam, and soon after he starts a political organization of his own in order to perpetuate his ideology. And during all these changes and transformations, his body becomes the tool to convey his transformation. During after he comes back from prison, he becomes a devoted Muslim. He follows this act of rituals of ablution to clean his body when he comes back from prison. Then he also follows these rituals of eating prescribed by the Islamic tradition. He also combs his hair, and that hair becomes a political symbol. There are many such instances that you could note. Moving forward, you can also see certain traumatic moments in the life of Malcolm X as having bodily responses, evoking bodily responses. For instance, when Malcolm learns about the betrayal by the Nation of Islam, he writes something like this: I felt that my head is bleeding from inside. I felt my brain is damaged, felt as if my brain is damaged. So all of these mental feelings evokes a sort of a bodily responses in him. In other words, body becomes a political symbol for Malcolm X. This is what, okay, that is the first trope that I wanted to discuss. The second the second trope is negotiation of the fragment itself. This is basically black people have to live two separate lives, basically. Their life was a series of negotiation separating the contradictions from their own individual self-image as Afro-Americans with their objectified image as the other. Basically, Afro-Americans in our image, that is one aspect of their life, and they also had another objectified image of themselves according to the white Americans. So they had to negotiate between these two different aspects of life, and this could be seen in the first instance, the use of the physical body as a metaphor, as in what is experienced through the body is only knowable by the self, and for the public, by the use of body as political. This is basically by using the body as a metaphor, by using the body as a political symbol, they intend to break away from this dichotomous aspect of their life. Another instance that you could cite in order to drive this point home, during the final chapters of his autobiography, Malcolm gives a sort of an advice to his followers, in which he says, every black man is supposed to start his own business, to make his own house. Then only can he earn self-respect. And without self-respect, you cannot lead a healthy emotional lifestyle. And this is something that the white man can never give to the black man. He has to earn it himself by supporting each other to build their own economically successful ventures and save houses for lodging, and that would lead to a self-dignity, which would eventually lead to a emotional well-being. And this fluid transformation between signs of economic success, physical security, and emotional well-being suggests a negotiation between fragmented selves. This is another point that I wanted to try. And the third trope I would like to explore is silence as activism. This is basically by transforming yourself, you achieve freedom. This is the end point of all of these emancipatory traditions. So you understand who you are and what you need, and at the end of the day, this will lead you to a feeling of self-dignity, which would eventually lead to emancipation, freedom. That's what it basically comes down to. So during the final chapters of his autobiography, the text presents Malcolm in full of action. He's doing a lot of things. He's negotiating with himself and trying to reach a consensus as to what his ideology must be. And all of these is in a way suggestive of his use of his personal self as the source of his political rhetoric. And when I say action, I should be clear enough to say that I don't literally mean physical action. This is a model that I adopt from Black women's emancipatory traditions. There, the action does not always stand for physical action. What they mean is sort of a physical standstill where you would not be doing anything, but your interior would be trying to reach a consensus. There would be an internal turmoil, but your external physique would be on a standstill. And this is what we can see in the final chapters of Malcolm X's autobiography. He realizes that most of the ideology that he has had was flawed, in that he initially believed that you cannot collaborate with white men to achieve freedom for the Afro-Americans. He believed in a violent revolution, which turned out to be not so ideal a solution. He also realized the different